Blade 2. Friends, if you want to watch the super hit action-packed movie Blade 2, 2002, in English, then make sure to like this video. And if you're visiting our channel for the very first time, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and press the bell icon so you never miss an update. In today's video, we're going to talk about the epic Marvel vampire film Blade 2, released in 2002. We'll explore what this movie is all about and where exactly you can watch it right now. We'll share all the interesting facts related to this film. I'll also tell you on which OTT platform or satellite TV channel this movie is currently available to watch. Plus, we're diving deep into the technical aspect of the film, from its music and cinematography to its pre-production, filming, and post-production journey. We'll also cover the film's budget, box office performance, and how it was received by audiences and critics. On top of that, I'll give you a short story summary, a spoiler-free review, and discuss the film's overall impact. We'll also talk about some lesser-known facts, the full storyline, the cast performances, and which actor played which character in the movie. So make sure to watch this video till the very end, because you won't want to miss any detail. So without any further delay, let's get started with the video. Blade 2, 2002, Plot and Narrative Analysis. Explained from a third-person perspective, in great detail. Overview of narrative style. Blade 2 follows a larger conventional three-act structure, with a linear storyline that unfolds chronologically. Unlike some experimental or non-linear superhero or horror films, this sequel to 1998 Blade opts for a clear and focused narrative trajectory, balancing action-driven pacing with emotionally and thematically resonant moments. The story picks up shortly after the events of the first film, and expands Blade's universe in both scale and depth. Act I set up an inciting incident. The film opens with Blade, Wesley Snipes, continuing his war against vampires, while also searching for his mentor, Abraham Whistler, who was presumed dead in the previous film. This forms the emotional groundwork for Blade's motivations early on. The narrative quickly establishes a new vampire threat, setting up a world that is not just at odds with Blade, but in growing danger itself. The inciting incident occurs when a new breed of vampire known as the Reapers emerges. Unlike regular vampires, Reapers are stronger, more aggressive, and immune to traditional vampire weaknesses. The vampires, facing extinction themselves, propose an uneasy alliance with Blade. This is a key twist, as it flips the core conflict of the franchise. Blade, the vampire hunter, must now work with vampires to stop a threat greater than both of them. Act 2, Rising Action and Conflict Development. Blade agrees to join forces with a vampire elite force known as the Bloodpack, a squad originally trained to kill Blade himself. This creates an intense internal conflict. Blade doesn't trust his new allies, and they don't trust him either. Thematically, this segment explores loyalty, survival, and blurred moral boundaries. As the team begins hunting the Reapers, the film transitions into its central action-driven phase. Set-piece battles in underground clubs, tunnels, and so showcase Guillermo del Toro's signature creature design and horror aesthetics. Each encounter reveals more about the Reapers, particularly their leader Nomak, who becomes a central figure in the narrative. Key turning points include the betrayal by the vampires, who secretly plan to capture Blade, the emotional reunion and eventual tragic farewell with Whistler, the romantic tension and subtle emotional bond between Blade and Nyssa, a vampire noblewoman and member of the Bloodpack. These moments ground the film emotionally amidst the chaos and explore themes of humanity, identity, and loss. Act 3, Climax and Resolution. The final act culminates in Blade's capture and near-death, followed by a triumphant recovery in a blood bowl scene, both literal and symbolic. He regains strength and fights his way to the final showdown. The climax centers around a brutal confrontation with Nomak, who is revealed to be the result of a vampire genetic experiment gone wrong, a creation of Nyssa's father, Damaskinos, who sought a superior breed of vampire. This twist reframes the narrative. The real villain is not the monstrous Nomak, but the arrogance and moral corruption of the vampire elite who tried to play God. Blade's battle with Nomak is both visceral and tragic, as Nomak is portrayed not just as a monster but as a tragic anti-hero, seeking revenge for his own creation and abandonment. Their duel ends in Nomak's suicide after being fatally wounded, lending the film a melancholic conclusion. Blade spares Nyssa, honoring her request to die as a vampire under the sun, giving her a peaceful death and symbolizing Blade's enduring inner conflict between his human compassion and his duty as a hunter. Themes and emotional impact. Duality and identity. Blade is caught between worlds, human and vampire, hunter and ally. Betrayal and trust. Both the vampires and Blade break and form alliances, raising questions about who the real monsters are. Tragedy and redemption. The narrative paints even its antagonists with complexity, especially Nomak and Nissa, making their death impactful rather than celebratory. The emotional resonance comes not from grand speeches or melodrama, but from silent sacrifices, moral ambiguity, and personal loss, a rare tone in comic book adaptations of that era. Conclusion. Blade 2 presents a tight, emotionally laid narrative that enhances the superhero and horror genres. While it maintains a linear structure, its depth lies in the moral complexity of its characters, the shifting alliances, and the darker themes of corruption, genetic manipulation, and identity. Guillermo del Toro's direction ensures that the narrative is not just action-packed but haunting and thoughtful, making Blade 2 more than just a sequel. It's a thematic evolution of the franchise. Blade 2, 2002. In-depth plot and narrative analysis. Directed by Guillermo del Toro, Blade 2 elevates the vampire hunting saga into darker, more emotionally rich territory. The film's narrative, though linearly told, is filled with emotional depth, layered character motivations, and allegorical subtext, all framed within a three-act structure that carefully blends action, horror, and sci-fi. Clapperboard Act I, the setup, exposition, and inciting incident. The film opens with a cold, sterile blood bank in Prague, where a seemingly frail man named Jared Nomak is taken to donate blood. In a shocking twist, Nomak reveals himself to be a terrifying mutant vampire and massacres the staff. This cold open sets a horror tone and introduces the Reaper virus, a key narrative driver. Meanwhile, Blade, Wesley Snipes, is operating in Eastern Europe, continuing his personal war against vampires. His current mission is to find and rescue Abraham Whistler, Kris Kristofferson, his mentor and father figure, who was thought to have died in the first film. Blade discovers that Whistler has been kept in a vampire stasis tank and successfully brings him back, curing him with an anti-vampire serum. This emotional reunion reconnects the audience to Blade's personal loss and quickly establishes the emotional heart of the film, his bond with Whistler. The inciting incident occurs when Blade is approached by Assad and Nissa, emissaries of the vampire overlord Eli Damaskinos. In a bold twist, the vampires propose a truce. They are facing a greater threat, the Reapers, a new vampire strain created by mutation that feeds not on humans but on vampires themselves. Cross Swords Act 2, rising tension and complex alliances. The second act begins with Blade's reluctant agreement to join forces with the Bloodpack, a vampire combat squad originally trained to kill him. Members include Reinhard, Ron Perlman, Chupa, Snowman, Lighthammer, and others, each with unique styles and personalities. This uneasy alliance sets up internal tension, especially between Blade and Reinhard, who constantly challenges and mocks him. Blade asserts dominance early, planting a bomb on Reinhard's head to keep him in check. These interpersonal conflicts provide rich character dynamics and emphasize Blade's role as a loner in both the human and vampire worlds. As the Bloodpack hunts the Reapers through vampire nightclubs and sewer tunnels, the film explores themes of survival, hierarchy, and morality. Del Toro's influence is seen in the gothic, bioorganic production design, particularly in the Reaper nest scenes, which are shot like claustrophobic horror sequences. Key developments include the evolution of the Reaper threat. The team learns that Reapers are immune to sunlight, garlic, and silver, and only vulnerable through their bone-encased hearts. Scientific horror. Whistler and Scud, Blade tech assistant, perform autopsies on Reaper corpses, discovering grotesque biological mutations. Nissa's growing respect for Blade. Despite her vampire heritage, she begins to admire Blade's conviction and sense of honor. Eventually, the team is ambushed in the sewers, leading to several casualties. The Bloodpack's numbers dwindle, and Blade is forced to work even more closely with Nissa. These action sequences are not just battles, but narrative tools within the cast, deepen trust, and raise the stakes. Counterclockwise arrows, narrative twists, and emotional arcs. In the midst of the mission, several major twists shift the narrative. Scud's betrayal. Blade's trusted technician is revealed to be a double agent, working for the vampires. Damaskinos' secret plan. It's revealed that the Reaper virus wasn't a random mutation, but a vampire genetic experiment, a failed attempt by Damaskinos to create a superior race. Nomak is his son, making the narrative a dark Frankenstein-like tale of science, legacy, and rebellion. Nissa's dilemma. Torn between loyalty to her father and her growing empathy for Blade, Nissa's arc evolves into one of internal conflict. She becomes a tragic figure, loyal, yet betrayed by her own kind. These twists not only serve the plot, but also reinforce the film's themes of betrayal, genetic arrogance, and the consequences of power-hungry ambition. Explosion Symbol Act 3, Climax and Resolution. Captured by Damaskinos, Blade is tortured and nearly drained of blood. This leads to one of the film's most iconic scenes, Blade's bloodbath resurrection, when Nissa releases him into a pool of blood. Rejuvenated, Blade slaughters dozens of vampire guards, in a scene that is both triumphant and symbolic of rebirth. The final showdown pits Blade against Nomak in a brutal, emotionally charged duel. Nomak is not a conventional villain. He is a sympathetic anti-hero, seeking revenge against a father who turned him into a monster. The fight is intense, blending martial arts with horror brutality. Blade eventually defeats Nomak, but the Reaper chooses to die by suicide, piercing his own heart. In the emotional epilogue, Nissa, infected by the Reaper strain, asks Blade to let her die peacefully in the sunlight. Blade honors her wish. The closing scene is tragic yet beautiful, with Nissa dissolving into ash as the sun rises. Performing arts narrative themes, emotional and thematic depth, duality and identity. Blade is both human and vampire, hunter and ally. The narrative explores the conflict of being trapped between two worlds, unable to fully belong to either. Science versus nature. Damaskinos' attempt to improve vampires results in creating something uncontrollable. This is a critique of playing God, genetic manipulation, and the dangers of hubris. Redemption and sacrifice. Characters like Whistler, Nissa, and even Nomak undergo arcs that involve sacrifice, regret, or redemption, giving the film unexpected emotional gravity. Monstrosity and humanity. The narrative blurs the line between monster and man. Nomak, though grotesque, shows more humanity than Damaskinos. Blade, though part vampire, shows more compassion than anyone else. Conclusion, a rich and layered narrative. While Blade 2 is an action horror film on the surface, its narrative depth lies in character development, moral ambiguity, and gothic tragedy. Guillermo del Toro infuses a film with mythological undertones, creature design, and emotional beats, making the story feel like a blend of comic book noir, vampire tragedy, and sci-fi horror. The story unfolds in a conventional but richly detailed structure, with meaningful turning points, escalating conflict, and a climax that delivers both in spectacle and emotion. Blade 2 doesn't just advance the franchise, it deepens its soul. Blade 2, 2002, Character Development Analysis. Directed by Guillermo del Toro, Blade 2 offers a significant expansion of the characters first introduced in the original film. While the movie is packed with action, horror, and sci-fi elements, it also explores complex character arcs, hidden motivations, and emotional transformations. The characters are not merely tools for the plot. They are carefully designed to reflect the film's themes of duality, betrayal, redemption, and identity. Dagger 1. Blade, Wesley Snipes, the reluctant savior caught between worlds. Character type, anti-hero, hybrid warrior. Development, subtle but emotionally layered. Blade is a central figure in the narrative, a Daywalker, half human, half vampire, who uses his powers to hunt the very species from which he descends. His internal conflict is not new, but in Blade 2, it is more pronounced and nuanced. Key layers of development. Emotional reawakening. In the first act, Blade rescues Whistler, who was presumed dead. This act is not just tactical, it is emotional. It reveals Blade's loyalty and emotional attachment, hinting at the humanity he constantly suppresses. Trust issues. Forced to ally with vampires, Blade remains cautious. His tension with the Bloodpack, particularly Reinhard, mirrors his constant internal conflict. Can he trust anyone, especially those he was raised to destroy? Relationship with Nissa. Blade begins to develop a complicated emotional bond with Nissa, a vampire princess. Their connection is not romantic in conventional sense, but is mutual and tragic. She represents a world he hates, but also a form of understanding he longs for. Her death in the end becomes a symbolic loss of something he can never have, connection and belonging. Heroic restraint. Despite his rage and vengeance, Blade often chooses mercy, such as when he grants Nissa's wish to die in sunlight. His humanity isn't shown through words, but through actions of compassion, which define his growth. End result. Blade doesn't drastically transform, but his emotional core is exposed, showing that under the armor and sword, he's fighting for more than survival. He's fighting for meaning, identity, and lost humanity. Boston Silhouette 2. Whistler, Kris Kristofferson, the broken mentor forged. Character type, grizzled mentor, surrogate father. Development, rebirth and reconciliation. Whistler's return from death is a powerful narrative device. He represents Blade's moral compass, the human anchor to his chaotic, hybrid existence. Key development points. Post-torture trauma. Whistler, after enduring vampire captivity, returns emotionally hardened and more fragile. His resentment toward Scud, Blade's temporary sidekick, shows his struggle with displacement. Father-son dynamic. The subtle dynamic between Blade and Whistler reveals their deep bond. Whistler challenges Blade, reminds him of what's at stake, and grounds him in humanity. Sacrifice and loyalty. Though he doesn't undergo radical change, Whistler's loyalty to Blade, even in his weakened condition, reaffirms their bond, and his presence is essential to rebuilding Blade's emotional foundation. Broken Heart 3. Nyssa, Leonor Varela, the tragic vampire seeking truth. Character type, noble vampire, tragic figure. Development, from loyal daughter to betrayed idealist. Nyssa is one of the most emotionally complex characters in film. Introduced as a daughter of vampire lord Damaskinos, she is a warrior, intellectual, and emissary. Her arc is both tragic and redemptive. Key development points. Alliance with Blade. Initially, Nyssa is formal and dismissive toward Blade, but as the film progresses, she witnesses his integrity and strength. She becomes emotionally torn between family loyalty and her admiration for Blade's morality. Moral awakening. When she learns of her father's role in creating the Reaper virus and betraying Blade, she begins to question her place in the vampire hierarchy. Her disillusionment becomes a key emotional turning point. Self-sacrifice. Infected by the Reaper strain, Nyssa asks Blade to let her die naturally in the sun. Her choice is not just personal but symbolic, a rejection of her lineage and a final embrace of Blade's values. End result. Nyssa's arc is a journey from obedience to moral clarity. Her death is one of the most emotional moments in the film, and deeply impacts Blade's psyche. Smiling Face with Horns 4. Jared Nomak, Luke Goss, the sympathetic monster. Character type, antagonist, tragic villain. Development, humanized through pain and betrayal. Nomak begins as a horrifying, nearly invincible monster, but as the narrative unfolds, he is revealed to be Damaskinos' biological son, the first Reaper, and a victim of genetic manipulation. Key development points. Vengeance versus survival. Nomak is not evil for the sake of being evil. He is seeking revenge against a father who abandoned him and used him as an experiment. Thematic counterpoint to Blade. Both Nomak and Blade are hybrids, created from two worlds. But while Blade found purpose, Nomak found only rejection. This makes him a dark reflection of Blade, what the hero could have become under different circumstances. Emotional complexity. In his final moments, after being mortally wounded by Blade, Nomak commits suicide, choosing his end rather than letting others claim victory. It is a haunting scene that underscores his dignity and despair. End result. Nomak is a sympathetic villain, embodying the pain of being unloved, unwanted, and used, a tragic result of arrogant ambition and parental betrayal. 5. Eli Damaskinos, the arrogant godfather of vampires. Character type, cold manipulator, shadow tyrant. Development, static but symbolic. As the architect of the Reaper strain, Damaskinos represents corruption, control, and immortality without conscience. He betrays Blade, his own daughter, and even the Bloodpack. He symbolizes a rotted core of the vampire elite, obsessed with evolution and survival, regardless of ethics. Damaskinos does not evolve, but he doesn't need to. He is the embodiment of unchecked power, and his eventual death by Nomak serves as poetic justice. Bomb 6. Scud, Norman Reedus, the fake ally. Character type, comic relief, traitor. Development, a twist character. Initially portrayed as Blade's young, enthusiastic techie, Scud injects a bit of humor and millennial sarcasm. He gains Blade's trust, which makes his reveal as a double agent all the more shocking. However, Blade outsmarts him, having suspected a betrayal all along. Scud's development is minimal, but his arc serves to advance Blade's mistrust theme and highlights the Daywalker's intuition. Cross Swords #7. The Bloodpack archetypes with brief moments. Members like Reinhard, Ron Perlman, Chupa, and Snowman represent diverse vampire archetypes, cocky, brutal, disciplined. Their interactions with Blade are confrontational and add layers of hostility and tension. Though their development is limited due to screen time, their deaths serve the story by demonstrating the Reaper's threat, reflecting the instability of the Vampire Alliance, providing obstacles and grudging respect for Blade. Book's conclusion, character as thematic mirror. Blade 2 uses its ensemble of characters not just as plot tools, but as reflections of the film's core themes. Blade vs. Nomak, the hybrid struggle between self-control and rage. Blade and Nyssa, the possibility of peace between enemies, cut short by fate. Whistler and Scud, trust versus betrayal. Demaskinos and Nomak, power versus consequence. Each character, whether they evolve or remain static, plays a role in shaping Blade's journey, forcing him to confront his humanity, his solitude, and the cost of his mission. Blade, Wesley Snipes. Role, protagonist, Daywalker, half vampire, half human. Archetype, subtle transformation with emotional unmasking. Blade is a stoic, disciplined warrior who embodies internal contradiction. He is both hunter and hunted, human and vampire, protector and killer. In Blade 2, his character isn't radically transformed, but the film peels back the emotional armor, revealing his vulnerabilities, suppressed emotions, and capacity for compassion. Left-pointing magnifying glass emotional evolution. Reuniting with Whistler is Blade's first major emotional arc. Whistler isn't just a mentor, he's a father figure. Rescuing him from captivity after years of presumed death reawakens Blade's deeply buried attachment and loyalty. This reveals Blade's underlying human need for connection, something his icy exterior tries to deny. His reluctant alliance with vampires is symbolic. Blade, who once saw the world in binary terms, good vs. evil, vampire vs. human, is forced into a gray zone, where survival requires trust in his natural enemies. This moral compromise tests his principles and adds psychological complexity. Relationship with Nyssa evolves without romantic cliches. Their connection is marked by shared loneliness and mutual respect. Nyssa sees a humanity in Blade. Blade sees a potential for goodness in a vampire. Their final exchange, where he grants her death by sunlight, is quiet, heartbreaking, and arguably Blade's most human act to date. Blade's inner conflict. Blade is not afraid of dying. He's afraid of feeling. His biggest fear is letting his emotions make him vulnerable. But by the end of the film, he allows himself to mourn, feel loss, and even offer tenderness. He remains physically unchanged, but emotionally evolved. 2. Abraham Whistler, Kris Kristofferson. Role, mentor, surrogate father, conscience. Archetype, redemption and reintegration. Whistler's return from captivity brings with it emotional scars, survivor's guilt, and a sense of displacement. The world moved on without him. Scud took his place. Blade adjusted. But Whistler has changed, damaged, bitter, but still loyal. Left-pointing magnifying glass key development. Suspicion of Scud reflects Whistler's instincts. He never quite trusts him. This foresight serves a plot later, but also shows that Whistler hasn't lost his edge, despite his trauma. Sacrificing his comfort to join Blade again shows deep loyalty. Whistler isn't just a tech guy. He represents Blade's moral compass, reminding him of why the war is worth fighting. While he doesn't have a traditional arc of change, Whistler's reintroduction is vital. He helps ground Blade emotionally, which in turn allows Blade's own character to open up. #3. Nyssa Demaskinos, Leonor Varela. Role, noble vampire, Demaskinos' daughter. Archetype, tragic redemption, moral awakening. Nyssa begins the film as a loyal servant of the vampire hierarchy, an aristocrat who carries herself with pride and honor. But her transformation is one of ideological and emotional awakening, left-pointing magnifying glass inner conflict and growth. Working with Blade forces her to confront uncomfortable truths. She starts seeing him as more moral than the society she defends. He fights with purpose, her kind fight for survival. She begins to question the ethics of her own people, especially when she learns about the Reaper virus experiments orchestrated by her own father. This realization destroys her sense of identity, turning her into a tragic figure caught between familial loyalty and moral clarity. Her final request, to die as a vampire watching the sunrise, is symbolic of her redemption. She chooses beauty, peace, and moral cleansing over eternal survival. Blade's act of honoring that which reveals his emotional growth and her own journey to moral transcendence. Symbolic role. Nyssa mirrors Blade. Both are outsiders, loyal to a race they didn't choose to belong to, fighting battles they didn't start. Their relationship is built not on romance, but mutual recognition of loneliness, honor, and pain. 4. Jared Nomak, Luke Goss. Role, antagonist, mutated vampire, Reaper. Archetype, tragic antivillain, rejected son. Nomak is one of the most multidimensional antagonists in comic book cinema. On the surface, he's a monster. But beneath the horrifying visage is a victim of genetic abuse, parental betrayal, and existential agony. Left-pointing magnifying glass psychological depth. He is the failed son, a biological experiment created by Damaskinos in a bid to create a perfect vampire breed. Abandoned, hated, and feared, Nomak becomes a living curse, driven by revenge. Unlike traditional villains, Nomak is sympathetic. He doesn't want world domination. He wants retribution, identity, and, in a way, connection. His conversations are few but potent. He sees the world as divided into those who abuse power and those who suffer from it. In his mind, he and Blade are equals, creations that never asked to exist. His suicide at the end isn't cowardice, it's control. He chooses his own death, robbing his creators of the final say in his fate. Symbolism. Nomak is a mirror to Blade, both hybrids, both ostracized. The difference is Blade found purpose, Nomak found rage. Their final battle is not just physical, it's a philosophical duel between discipline and chaos, justice and vengeance. #5. Eli Damaskinos, the vampiric god complex. Role, power-hungry vampire overlord. Archetype, static, symbolic of authoritarianism. Damaskinos doesn't undergo personal transformation. His arc serves as a catalyst for others' change, especially Nyssa and Nomak. Left-pointing magnifying glass character profile. Cold, calculating, immortal, and arrogant. Damaskinos represents the abuse of science and legacy, willing to sacrifice his own daughter and son for genetic supremacy. His ultimate goal is not peace or coexistence, it's control, and he manipulates everyone to achieve it. Blade, the Bloodpack, even his own family. His death is poetic justice, delivered by the very son he tried to discard. Symbolism. Damaskinos is the embodiment of dynastic evil, a godfather-like figure who values legacy over life. His fall mirrors a crumbling of vampire elitism and a collapse of an immoral regime. Smiling face with Horn 6. Reinhard, Ron Perlman, and the Bloodpack. Role, Vampire Strike Team. Archetype, thematic obstacles, minor development. Reinhard is an arrogant, openly racist vampire who challenges Blade at every opportunity. While not deeply developed, his purpose is to provoke, test, and reflect Blade's restraint. Blade plants a bomb on his neck early, symbolizing that Blade sees through his bravado and keeps him in check. Reinhard's death is not just satisfying, it is narratively owned, reflecting Blade's dominance and moral superiority. The other Bloodpack members, Chupa, Lighthammer, Snowman, function as genre archetypes, each with a different fighting style and personality. While they don't undergo deep growth, their deaths symbolize a failure of vampire arrogance and emphasize Blade's superiority in both skill and discipline. 7. Scud, Norman Reedus, the comic traitor. Role, Blade's tech sidekick, traitor. Archetype, twist reveal, betrayal. Scud begins as a replacement for Whistler, a youthful, laid-back, tech-savvy helper. His charm, sarcasm, and would create a false sense of loyalty that pays off when he's revealed to be a double agent working for Damaskinos. His betrayal is crucial. It reinforces Blade's core theme. Trust is dangerous. Blade, always a step ahead, turns the tables, revealing he suspected Scud all along. This not only elevates Blade's intellect, but underscores his emotional caution. He wants to trust, but knows better. Wesley Snipes as Blade, a commanding, stoic force. Wesley Snipes once again fully inhabits the role of Blade, delivering a performance that blends brutal physicality with silent emotional gravity. He doesn't play Blade as a flashy superhero, but rather as a controlled, brooding, and emotionally guarded warrior, a man burdened by loneliness and rage, yet grounded in a strict moral code. Left-pointing magnifying glass key strengths. Physical presence. Snipes is a trained martial artist, and this comes through in every movement. His fight choreography isn't just believable, it's fluid, precise, and lethal, making the action scenes intensely engaging. Minimalist emotion. Blade is a man of few words, and Snipes communicates much through facial expressions, body language, and tone. His eyes convey pain, especially in scenes with Whistler or Nyssa. Emotional subtlety. The moments where Blade connects with Nyssa or mourns Whistler are quietly powerful. Snipes never overacts. He lets a character's internal struggle show through restraint. Bullseye verdict. Snipes delivers a standout performance that defines the character as one of the most unique anti-heroes in cinema. His portrayal gives Blade an identity beyond just action, a mythic figure caught between two worlds. Kris Kristofferson as Whistler, the grizzled soul of the film. Kris Kristofferson returns as Abraham Whistler, and his performance brings a worn, world-weary humanity to the otherwise stylized, gothic universe of Blade 2. Kristofferson excels at playing characters who have seen too much, and he channels this perfectly here. Left-pointing magnifying glass performance highlights gravitas and grit. His voice, demeanor, and expressions all carry the weight of trauma, loss, and aging, especially after being rescued from vampire captivity. Tough love. His interactions with Blade show both fatherly care and hard-earned wisdom. Kristofferson walks a tightrope between sarcasm, affection, and skepticism. Emotional undercurrent. While Whistler is not overly expressive, Kristofferson subtly shows that his loyalty to Blade is more than just duty. It's love, even if he can't say it aloud. Bullseye verdict. A low-key but deeply effective performance that grounds the film emotionally. Whistler represents Blade's humanity, and Kristofferson embodies that role perfectly. #Leonor Varela as Nyssa, a tragic and noble performance. Leonor Varela brings elegance, depth, and nuance to the character of Nyssa Damaskinos, the vampire princess caught between loyalty and truth. Her performance is marked by grace, quiet strength, and emotional conflict. Left-pointing magnifying glass performance highlights composure and dignity. Nyssa is introduced as formal and aristocratic. Varela's poised demeanor and articulate delivery establish her as intelligent and principled, even when surrounded by treacherous allies. Emotional growth. As Nyssa begins to question her father's motives and empathize with Blade, Varela lets her emotional arc unfold gradually. Her eyes convey regret, sorrow, and conflicted feelings with subtle power. Final scene. Her request to die in the sunlight is a masterclass in quiet tragedy. She doesn't cry or beg. She simply surrenders to the truth she now believes in. Varela handles this scene with restrained pathos, making it one of the film's most emotionally resonant moments. Bullseye verdict. A standout performance that brings emotional depth to a character that could have been one-dimensional. Varela's Nyssa adds grace, sorrow, and ability to the film's darker world. Luke Goss as Jared Nomak, the sympathetic monster. Luke Goss delivers a chilling yet strangely empathetic performance as Jared Nomak, the mutated vampire Reaper, who is as much a victim as he is a villain. Left-pointing magnifying glass performance highlights physical transformation. Goss's physicality and intense movement style bring a creature-like realism to Nomak. His hunched posture, feral expressions, and unpredictable behavior make him genuinely menacing. Emotional complexity. Despite his monstrous appearance, Nomak has moments of deep sadness. Goss underplays his emotions, allowing glimpses of vulnerability and trauma to seep through, especially when he speaks about betrayal and his creation. Final confrontation. In his last scene with Blade, Goss plays Nomak not as a defeated villain, but as a weary soul, someone ready to end his pain. The moment he stabs himself is quietly devastating. Bullseye verdict. A surprisingly nuanced performance from Goss, who manages to turn a monstrous villain into a tragic mirror of Blade himself. His performance elevates the antagonist from scary to unforgettable. Smiling face with horns Ron Perlman as Reinhard, the cocky wildcard. Ron Perlman brings his signature gruff charisma and dry wit to the role of Reinhard, a member of the Bloodpack who constantly challenges Blade. He is a classic antagonist, not the main villain, but a source of tension and conflict. Left-pointing magnifying glass performance highlights. Verbal sparring with Blade. Perlman leans into the role's arrogance and bigotry, making Reinhard easy to hate, but fun to watch. His confrontations with Blade are tense and entertaining, and his reactions are always on point. Comic timing. Despite his hostility, Reinhard brings a biting sense of humor to the film. Perlman knows how to deliver lines with menace and mockery. Comeuppance. His death at the hands of Blade is satisfying largely because Perlman plays the villain so convincingly, the audience is waiting for him to get what's coming. Bullseye verdict. An excellent supporting performance. Perlman adds personality, danger, and sarcasm to the Bloodpack, making every scene his and more compelling. #microscope supporting cast. Scud, Norman Reedus, Demaskinos, Thomas Kretschmann, and other Bloodpack members, Chupa, Snowman, etc., all contribute well to the ensemble. Left-pointing magnifying glass notable mentions. Norman Reedus as Scud. Reedus delivers an engaging, cocky performance that feels genuine. His twist betrayal is well acted, and his casual demeanor adds modern, techie charm to the dark world. Thomas Kretschmann as Demaskinos. Though not deeply expressive, Kretschmann's icy calm and detached delivery make him feel like a cold-blooded vampire king, more interested in science than emotion. Donnie Yen as Snowman. While he has limited dialogue, Yen's presence as a martial arts icon brings authenticity and skill to the fight scenes. Performing arts ensemble chemistry and emotional resonance. One of Blade 2's strengths lies in the chemistry among the cast. Snipes and Kristofferson maintain a father-son dynamic that feels lived in and affectionate beneath the surface. Snipes and Varela generate genuine emotional tension, not romantic in a forced way, but a slow-burning connection of mutual respect. The Bloodpack's tension with Blade is palpable, particularly with Perlman's Reinhard, which makes every group scene charged with potential betrayal. Conclusion: performances that serve theme and story. Blade 2 benefits immensely from performances that go beyond genre expectations. Rather than relying on over-the-top melodrama or comic book exaggeration, the cast brings grounded intensity and emotional nuance, even in a film filled with supernatural horror and stylized action. Actor role performance quality narrative contribution. Wesley Snipes' Blade stoic, powerful, emotionally restrained anchors a film with gravitas. Kris Kristofferson Whistler wounded but loyal emotional heart and moral guide. Leonor Varela Nissa elegant, tragic, layered adds complexity and emotional depth. Luke Goss Nomak monstrous but sympathetic transforms villain into anti-hero. Ron Perlman Reinhard charismatic antagonist adds tension and comic sharpness. Norman Reedus Scud youthful, sarcastic, deceptive surprise twist, betrayal arc. Let me know if you'd like a visual ranking chart of performances or comparison between Blade 2 and Blade 1998 in terms of acting. Director Guillermo del Toro. Renowned for his love of dark fantasy, mythological creatures, and gothic storytelling, Guillermo del Toro brought a distinctive creative vision to Blade 2 that elevated the film far beyond typical comic book fare. His direction reshaped the sequel into a stylistic, atmospheric, and emotionally textured experience, balancing intense action with eerie horror and moral ambiguity. Performing arts tone and mood, a bleak, gothic undercurrent. Del Toro creates a tone that is darker, moodier, and more emotionally complex than its predecessor. While Blade, 1998, leaned into flashy action and techno style, Blade 2 explores existential dread, genetic horror, and internal conflict, making it feel closer to a modern gothic tale than a superhero romp. Tone of tragedy. Characters like Nomak and Nissa are painted in tragic shades, showing Del Toro's preference for sympathetic monsters and conflicted souls. Atmospheric world building. Locations are damp, shadowy, and filled with decaying architecture, visually reinforcing the film's themes of decay, evolution, and death. Mood of paranoia. Del Toro injects the film with a palpable sense of distrust and danger, especially among the Bloodpack. creating narrative tension that extends beyond action sequences. Camera with flash visual style and shot composition. Del Toro's background as a visual storyteller is unmistakable. His attention to framing, lighting, color, and camera movement makes every scene visually arresting. Use of color and contrast. The film is dominated by cold blues, gunmetal grays, and pale skin tones, which contrast with warm, golden hues during key emotional moments, like Nissa's death in the sunlight. This use of visual contrast enhances the emotional resonance of major beats. Symmetry and geometry. Del Toro often uses symmetrical compositions to portray structure and control. Damasceno's lair versus asymmetry and chaos in the Saw scenes where the Reapers reside, visually distinguishing the two vampire factions. Creative angles. From overhead shots of Blade in combat to low angles that emphasize Nomak's growing power, Del Toro's cinematography choices reinforce character dominance and narrative stakes. Camera movement. The camera is rarely static during action scenes. Sweeping shots, whip pans, and tracking movements create a visceral, kinetic energy that complements a choreography without disorienting the viewer. Stopwatch hash pacing and rhythm. Tight yet patient. Del Toro maintains a tight, forward-moving pace, but he also takes time for quiet, reflective moments, particularly when exploring characters' internal struggles or building suspense. Balanced structure. The film begins with urgency, pauses for character building, then escalates into a non-stop second half filled with betrayals, revelations, and blood-soaked showdowns. Tension building. Scenes with the Reapers are paced like horror sequences, with slow reveals, eerie silences, and jump scares, drawing from Del Toro's horror sensibilities. Control chaos. Even the most chaotic battles, e.g., Bloodpack versus Reapers, are well choreographed and narratively coherent, avoiding the sensory overload common in other action films of the time. Skull horror aesthetic. Vampires reimagined. Del Toro completely redefines the vampire mythos in Blade 2. Instead of elegant, romanticized vampires, he introduces the Reapers, a grotesque, mutated subspecies with biomechanical jaws and parasitic hunger. These creatures are distinctly Del Toro-esque, blending body horror with tragedy. Creature design. Del Toro's obsession with monsters is clear in Nomak's symmetrical jaw-splitting anatomy, which evokes fear but also sympathy. He is both predator and victim. Practical effects. The director leans heavily on prosthetics and practical makeup, giving the monsters and wounds a tactile realism that grounds a fantasy in physicality. Moral ambiguity. Del Toro doesn't clearly label any side as good or evil. Even Blade, the hero, kills with brutality. This blurring of moral lines adds depth and tension throughout the narrative. Performing arts character focus and narrative themes. Guillermo del Toro's direction always places emphasis on emotional depth and thematic resonance, and Blade 2 is no exception. Blade's isolation. Del Toro emphasizes Blade's emotional solitude through quiet moments, him staring into the dark, reacting to Nissa's moral awakening, or witnessing Whistler's fragility. Sympathetic monsters. Jared Nomak, like many of Del Toro's future monsters, Hellboy, The Shape of Water, is not just a villain. He is a symbol of betrayal, abandonment, and pain. His journey is mirrored against Blade's. Betrayal and duality. From Scud's turn to Damasceno's secret experiments, betrayal and double identities are central themes. Del Toro's direction ensures that each betrayal hits hard by focusing on emotional reaction shots and lingering silences. Repeat button recurring directorial trademarks. Del Toro brings many of his signature techniques to Blade 2, foreshadowing his later works. Del Toro trademark application in Blade 2. #sympathetic monsters Jared Nomak, and even Nissa show human emotions beneath monstrous forms. Artist palette gothic design vampire palaces, underground labs, and ancient architecture steep the film in gothic horror. Body horror, the Reaper's jaw mechanism is grotesque, alien, and deeply disturbing. Practical effects, a preference for realism through makeup, prosthetics, and physical choreography. Broken heart tragic tone, the emotional fates of Nomak and Nissa add a tragic undercurrent to the action. Conclusion, visionary direction that elevated the genre. Guillermo del Toro's direction in Blade 2 transforms a standard comic book sequel into a visually rich, emotionally laid, and stylistically distinct hybrid of horror, action, and gothic tragedy. His ability to blend genre thrills with character-driven storytelling results in a film that's as intellectually engaging as it is viscerally exciting. Rather than simply delivering spectacle, Del Toro imbues a film with soul, sorrow, and symbolism, creating an enduring entry in the superhero genre that feels ahead of its time. His choices in pacing, creature design, mood, and moral ambiguity mark Blade 2 not just as a great sequel, but as a Guillermo del Toro film through and through. Director of Photography, Gabriel Beristain. Cinematographer Gabriel Beristain, who had worked on films like The Craze and later joined the Marvel Cinematic Universe Iron Man, brought a unique blend of European sensibility and modern action stylization to Blade 2. Under the direction of Guillermo del Toro, Beristain's cinematography helped shape the film's neo-gothic atmosphere, turning this action horror sequel into a visually immersive experience. New moon symbol lighting. Darkness as a narrative device. Lighting plays a critical role in establishing mood, hierarchy, and character psychology throughout the film. Low-key lighting. The dominant style in Blade 2 is low-key lighting, where heavy shadows and limited light sources create a moody, noir-inspired feel. This enhances the film's horror elements and reflects the world's moral ambiguity. Backlighting and silhouettes. Blade is often backlit, casting his figure in partial or full silhouette, reinforcing his mythic, lone warrior status. These shadows frame him as both predator and protector, adding to his anti-horror mystique. Color temperatures. Cool tones, blues and grays, dominate the film, especially in scenes featuring the vampire world, the sewers, or clinical environments like Damaskino's lab. These emphasize coldness, detachment, and death. Warm tones, oranges and yellows, are reserved for emotionally intimate or ironic moments, like Nissa's death in The Sunrise, signaling warmth, vulnerability, and fleeting beauty. Practical light sources. The use of visible, motivated light, like streetlights, neon, or torches in underground tunnels, helps maintain realism while still embracing stylization. Clapperboard camera angles and movement, power, speed, and isolation. The cinematography uses precise angle choices and dynamic movement to communicate dominance, vulnerability, and chaos. Low angles, used to portray power and menace, especially for Blade and Nomak. When Blade enters a fight, the camera often looks up at him, emphasizing his strength and calm under pressure. High angles, occasionally used to disempower certain characters or emphasize the scale of destruction. When the Bloodpack is ambushed, the camera shifts high to show their vulnerability. Overhead and rotational shots. Several fight scenes feature 360 degrees rotational shots, overhead choreography, and wide pulls, emphasizing the balletic precision of Blade's combat style. Tracking and Steadicam work. During action scenes, the camera follows characters with smooth, deliberate tracking, keeping the viewer immersed but oriented. This is most visible in the Reaper battle in the Soleil, where the camera weaves between tight corners and flashing blades. Crash zooms and whip pans. Del Toro and Beristain occasionally employ quick zoom-ins or pans to heighten tension, especially when revealing new threats or sudden betrayals. Frame picture hash framing and composition. Visual storytelling beyond dialogue. Beristain's framing in Blade 2 often reinforces characters' emotional states, relationships, and symbolic roles. Blade as a centerpiece. Blade is usually center-framed, commanding the screen. Even when standing among others, e.g., with a Bloodpack, he is subtly isolated through negative space or lens focus, underscoring his outsider status. Symmetry in vampire architecture. The composition inside Damaskino's palace is often perfectly symmetrical, reflecting order, hierarchy, and false civility, which contrasts with the chaotic, asymmetrical soleils of the Reapers. Reflections in glass. The film occasionally uses mirrors, screens, or glass barriers to symbolize duality, Blade's vampire a human nature, the deceptive loyalty of Scud, or Nissa's internal conflict. Tight framing for tension. In horror scenes, the cinematography often tightens, using claustrophobic close-up to amplify the fear and helplessness of being hunted, particularly effective during Nomak's ambush scenes. Fire visually striking moments. Several scenes in Blade 2 are remembered as iconic visual set pieces, thanks to the bold cinematographic choices. Blade's entrance to the Bloodpack dojo. The lighting reflects off the metallic walls and his black leather, making him appear otherworldly. The framing and camera movement slow down to build anticipation and awe. Saw ambush scene. The dim, flickering lighting and reddish hue turn the Saw into a nightmarish, womb-like battleground. Handheld shots and flickering sources replicate the feeling of being hunted in the dark. Nomak's first attack. Nomak is filmed from behind as he silently approaches vampires in a club. The camera remains slow and methodical, building dread, before chaos explodes with sharp cuts and shaky cam. Nissa's death in the sunlight. A rare moment of peace. This scene uses a soft golden glow, dissolving the cold visuals from the rest of the film. The warm light, combined with slow camera movements and Blade's pained expression, creates a powerful emotional climax. Milky Way atmosphere, tension, and visual symbolism. The cinematography works in tandem with the film's themes of evolution, betrayal, and isolation. Atmosphere. The interplay of fog, shadows, and colored lighting creates an ever-present tension and supernatural dread. There's a constant sense that something is lurking beyond the light. Tension. By withholding full visibility, through dim lighting, partial reveals, or rapid cuts, the cinematography ensures that viewers feel as paranoid and untrusting as the characters. Beauty and darkness. Despite its grim tone, Blade 2 finds beauty in grotesque, through symmetry, fluid motion, and operatic lighting. This reflects Del Toro's trademark belief that monstrosity and grace can coexist. Bullseye conclusion. Cinematography that tells a story visually. In Blade 2, Gabriel Beristain cinematography doesn't just support the story, it actively tells it. From the framing of Blade as a mythic figure, to the haunting shadows that define friend and foe, the camera serves as both a narrative guide and emotional translator. By blending horror-inspired lighting, stylish action framing, and symbolic compositions, the cinematography enhances the film's unique identity, a vampire superhero film with a soul, visual sophistication, and gothic flair. Overview of editing style. Edited by Peter Amundsen, a frequent collaborator with director Guillermo del Toro, Blade 2 features a meticulously engineered editing style that balances high-octane action sequences with moments of suspense, exposition, and emotional introspection. The editing plays a crucial role in managing the movie's dual tone, part horror thriller, part superhero action, and in maintaining consistent narrative drive over its 117-minute runtime. Stopwatch hash pacing, tight, rhythmic, and purposeful. From the outset, Blade 2 sets a relentless pace that rarely allows the audience to disengage. The structure adheres to a traditional three-act format, but within each act, the film sustains tension through a varied rhythm, never lingering too long in one mood or style. Act 1 setup begins with quick-cut montages and a fast-moving introduction of characters, including Blade's mission to retrieve Whistler. This act moves briskly, establishing key players and setting the stage for the alliance with the vampires. Act 2 conflict. The pacing momentarily slows to allow for character development and tension building, particularly during Blade's interactions with the Bloodpack. These slower sequences are necessary for audience investment and are carefully balanced with explosive fight scenes and visually intense action. Act 3 climax delivers the film's most kinetic editing. Fast, aggressive cuts match to the rapid choreography of the final battles, interspersed with slower, emotional beats, such as Blade's moment with Nissa. The transitions are carefully designed to avoid tonal whiplash. Result: the pacing follows a pattern of fast, slow, fast, allowing for a roller coaster-like experience that mirrors Blade's journey, strategic, violent, but never emotionless. Clapperboard action scene editing. Precision meets chaos. The action editing in Blade 2 is one of its standout features, marked by rapid cuts that don't confuse. Unlike many early 2000s action films, Blade 2 maintains spatial clarity even during fast edits. The camera doesn't linger excessively, but neither does it cut so quickly as to disorient the viewer. Choreography-driven cuts. Fight scenes, especially Blade versus the Reapers or Blade versus the Bloodpack, are edited in sync with martial arts movements and weapon arcs. This keeps momentum strong and allows each movement to land with impact. Use of slow motion and speed ramps. At key points, e.g., Blade leaping through glass or swinging his sword in arcs, slow motion is used sparingly but effectively. These moments allow the audience to catch their breath and admire the artistry of the action. Parallel editing in climax. In the final act, the editor employs cross-cutting between Blade's battle and the unfolding betrayal in Damaskino's fortress. This heightens narrative tension and underscores the film's themes of loyalty and deception, performing art's emotional rhythm and narrative impact. Beyond action, Blade 2's editing enhances the film's emotional beats and character arcs. Blade and Nyssa. Their growing bond is portrayed through lingering cuts and slightly extended reaction shots, emphasizing vulnerability and trust. In contrast to the harsh, fast action edits, these moments feel soft, reflective, and deliberate. Scud's betrayal. The reveal is edited with tight close-ups and sharp intercut between Blade's realization and Scud's smug confidence. This contrast creates emotional payoff and elevates a potentially predictable twist into a memorable moment. Nomac's tragedy. The final moments with Nomak are edited to slow down deliberately, using longer takes to highlight his pain, defiance, and ultimate downfall. This shift in pacing emphasizes the tragedy at the heart of his character. Repeat button transitions and scene flow. Seamless scene transitions. Transitions in Blade 2 often use visual match cuts, hard cuts to black, or sound bridges. These maintain flow without feeling abrupt and often serve to heighten anticipation, e.g., transitioning from calm dialogue to sudden violence. Stylized scene endings. Some sequences end with a visual or musical sting, accompanied by a dramatic cut, perfectly matching Del Toro's gothic tone and reinforcing narrative punctuation. Flashbacks or disjointed time. Blade 2 maintains a linear structure, opting not to experiment with non-linear storytelling. However, it makes up for this with temporal pacing tricks, accelerating or decelerating action to modulate tension, akin to music tempo shifts in a symphony. Impact on viewer engagement. The consistent rhythm and editing choices in Blade 2 ensure that the audience remains constantly engaged. Emotional beats are allowed breathing space. Action is visceral but never overwhelming. The story never feels stretched or rushed. Even when exposition is required, like the explanation of the Reaper virus or vampire politics, the editor intersperses it with cutaways, sound effects, and reactions, keeping it visually dynamic and preventing narrative lulls. Checkered flag conclusion, editing that serves both style and substance. Blade 2 exemplifies editing that is both stylish and functional. Peter Amundsen's work ensures that the film's gothic horror tone, comic book energy, and martial arts-inspired action are all presented in a way that feels cohesive and compelling. By pacing its sequences with precision, alternating between frenzied action and moody introspection, and delivering clean, impactful transitions, the film keeps viewers on edge from the opening frame to the final shot, resulting in a visually and emotionally satisfying experience. Let me know if you'd like this transformed into a YouTube script version, infographic, or if you want the same analysis for other aspects of the film like sound design or production design. Blade 2, 2002, in-depth editing and pacing analysis. Black Scissors' #editor's role, Peter Amundsen and Del Toro's rhythmic vision. Editor Peter Amundsen, known for his precision in balancing spectacle and story, collaborates closely with Guillermo del Toro to craft a film that never lingers too long on a single tone. Their partnership ensures that Blade 2 delivers not only thrilling set pieces, but also emotional beats and thematic complexity, all stitched together with purposeful timing and rhythm. The editing in Blade 2 isn't merely functional. It is an instrument of narrative and mood, guiding the audience through horror, suspense, action, and even tragedy. Clock hash macro-level structure and narrative flow. The film's overall pacing can be split into 4 distinct movements, akin to musical composition. 1. Prologue and Rescue, opening 10 minutes. Begins with a cold open introducing Jared Nomak in a tense blood bank scene. Rapid cutting builds horror tension. Jump cuts and eerie transitions create unease. Blade's action entrance is swift and stylized, with quick edits, strobe lighting, and slow-mo to emphasize power and precision. The rescue of Whistler is fast-paced but emotionally grounded. Longer shots during Whistler's healing slow the rhythm and create contrast. 2. Alliance and Bloodpack, setup phase. Hey, the pacing deliberately slows down. Dialogue-heavy scenes allow for character interactions and conflict setup, e.g., tension with Reinhard. Editing emphasizes lingering reaction shots, especially on Blade's expressions, showing his control and hidden thoughts. Transitional scenes between lays, missions, and base camps are smoothed with fade-ins and atmospheric sound bridges. 3. Reaper confrontation and betrayal, middle arc. The Reaper sword battle is a masterclass in cross-cutting. Tight, erratic edit when characters are split up. Sudden shifts in camera angles to mimic the Reaper's erratic movement. Use of dark filters and color grading helps the editor create a disorienting but cohesive experience. When Scud betrayal is revealed, The cut timing becomes sharp and almost sarcastic, reflecting Blade's calm takedown of a character who thought he had the upper hand. 4. Finale and emotional fallout, climax and resolution. The final act shows an evolution in pacing. Fast cuts for Blade's explosive escape and fight against Nomak, then a steady, poetic rhythm in the final scene with Nyssa. Editing allows the emotional arc to resolve with breathing room, no rushing through emotional payoffs. Nyssa's death is edited like a farewell opera. Soft dissolves, a slow fade out, and minimal sound design for maximum impact. Clapperboard action editing, controlled chaos. Action scenes are not just about speed, they're about rhythmic control. Blade 2 uses. Speed ramping. Especially in Blade sword fights, the transition between fast cuts and brief slow-motion shots gives weight to key strikes. Cut-on-action technique. A common editing trick where the cut occurs mid-motion, preserving continuity and energy. Multiple camera angles in one move. In Nomak's fights, several cuts show the same motion from different angles, enhancing his superhuman unpredictability. Example. In the surgical lab scene, where Nomak rips through security guards, the editing becomes jagged and unpredictable, reflecting his feral nature. The fight is intercut with terrified reactions and flickering lights, making the viewer feel just as overwhelmed as the characters. Broken heart emotional and thematic modulation through editing. Blade 2 isn't just blood and swords, it's about loyalty, identity, and tragic legacy. The editing helps express these themes. Blade stoicism versus vulnerability. Blade is composed, but when Nyssa is wounded or Whistler is threatened, the editing lingers, focusing on subtle expressions. The pacing slows to let emotion seep through his armor. Nyssa's final scene, edited with minimal cuts, long takes, and soft light, it gives the scene emotional space. Unlike the rapid rhythm of the action, this moment feels suspended in time, emphasizing finality and loss. Scud's death. Instead of making it explosive, the editing here is snappy but dry, reflecting Blade's emotional detachment and mastery. The tonal shift is achieved without needing excess cuts or dialogue. Hourglass with flowing sand microlevel scene construction, moments that breathe. What sets Blade 2 apart is the ability to let scenes breathe when needed. Dialogue scenes. For instance, the conversation between Nyssa and Blade at sunrise is edited with gentle cuts, showing each character listening and reacting, not just talking. Tension build-up. Before Reaper's attack, the editing uses extended silences, off-screen noises, and slow zooms, letting suspense grow organically. Counterclockwise arrow transitions, from scene to scene. Sound bridge transitions. Often, a line of dialogue or ambient sound carries over into the next scene, creating a seamless flow. Visual symmetry. Some transitions mirror prior scenes, Blade walking into a room at the same angle as Nomak did earlier, suggesting thematic parallels. Graphic matching, a rare but effective technique used once when the camera cuts from a spinning blood sample to the spinning wheels of Blade's motorcycle, creating a subconscious continuity. Del Toro's signature influence on editing choices. Director Guillermo del Toro is known for his love of rhythm, visual poetry, and gothic storytelling. These sensibilities shape the editing. Editing is emotion. Del Toro avoids overly mechanical cutting. Even in action, he asks his editor to find the soul in the movement. Comic book style. The film retains a comic book flavor in its edits, quick panel-like shifts during action, bold transitions, and stylized pauses to emphasize hero poses or mid-air strikes. Checkered flag final thoughts. Pacing as a narrative tool. The editing and pacing in Blade 2 are not just about keeping things moving. They are an essential part of the storytelling. Whether it's a calm before a brutal encounter or the poetic rhythm of a character's final breath, every cut serves a purpose. The film never drags, because each quiet scene has tension and each action scene has clarity. The pacing reflects a world, chaotic, violent, but built on honor and tragedy. Through smart transitions, layered rhythm, and emotional timing, Blade 2 emerges not just as a great action horror film, but as a carefully orchestrated cinematic experience. Blade 2, 2002, Soundtrack and Score Analysis. The soundtrack and score of Blade 2 play a crucial role in shaping its unique identity. Directed by Guillermo del Toro, the film straddles the worlds of horror, science fiction, and comic book action, and the music reflects this blend with dark electronic beats, orchestral tension, and hard-hitting rhythms. Unlike traditional superhero scores, Blade 2 leans heavily into industrial, techno, and hip-hop influenced electronica, crafting an aural landscape that is both futuristic and visceral. Headphone soundtrack overview, a fusion of electronic and hip-hop. The soundtrack album for Blade 2 is a collaborative project that pairs electronic music producers with hip-hop artists, resulting in a pulsating mix that feels both underground and cinematic. The soundtrack was curated by Happy Walters and released under the Warner Brothers label, featuring artists like Massive Attack and Mos Def, Paul Oakenfold and Ice Cube, The Roots and BT, Danny Saber and J Boogie's Dubtronic Science. This blending of genres isn't just for style. It mirrors the film's hybrid themes: vampire-human alliances, ancient threats meeting futuristic weapons, and morality clashing with survival. Score by Marco Beltrami, orchestral horror with a tech edge. The original score is composed by Marco Beltrami, known for his work in horror, Scream, Resident Evil, and he delivers a soundtrack that enhances both tension and character depth. Beltrami brings menacing brass sections for suspense, electronic distortions layered over traditional strings and percussion, sharp staccato rhythms to heighten urgency during action scenes, gothic undertone for emotional or tragic moments, especially in scenes involving Nyssa and Nomak. This hybrid approach fits Del Toro's tone perfectly, elevating the supernatural while grounding the human stakes. Repeat button recurring motifs and musical themes. Blade's theme, a deep, driving pulse with occasional synth overlays, used during fight sequences and moments when Blade asserts control, conveys his dual nature, both man and vampire, through a cold, mechanical beat layered over a subtle human melody. Bat the Reaper motif, high-pitched, distorted strings layered over drone-like bass, appears whenever Nomak or his infected followers appear on screen, evokes predatory terror and genetic monstrosity, signaling their evolution beyond vampires. Broken Heartness's theme, delicately melancholic piano notes with faint violins, sparse but impactful, used mostly in moments of personal conflict or emotional connection with Blade, adds emotional grounding to the film's cold, action-heavy palette. Cross-Swords #key scene highlights how music drives a film. 1. Blade's club fight early scene. A remix featuring Fatboy Slim's electronica with Redman's vocals sets the tone for the film's hyper-stylized action. The music is in sync with the choreography, giving each punch and sword swing rhythmic weight. The blend of beats and bass makes Blade feel like a mythical figure in a techno-urban legend. 2. Saw Reaper Battle. Beltrami's score takes center stage. Tense violins, sudden brass stabs, and rhythmic percussion mimic heartbeats and panic. The music speeds up with every Reaper ambush, making viewers feel trapped alongside the Bloodpack. Silence is also used strategically. Moments where music drops out are filled with the Reaper's terrifying screeches, enhancing dread. 3. Nomak's transformation and rampage. The score features metallic, industrial distortions, suggesting unnatural evolution. These sequences are noisy, but intentionally chaotic, reflecting Nomak's rage and unstoppable nature. 4. Final Battle, Blade vs. Nomak. Here, the score becomes operatic. Rising strings, choral elements, and thunderous drums heighten the mythic clash. Del Toro allows Beltrami to stretch the musical canvas, making the duel feel like a tragic fate being fulfilled. 5. Nyssa's death scene. One of the rare moments where the music is minimal and soft. Gentle piano and strings mirror the emotional intimacy and quiet resignation. Blade's silence and the fading melody amplify the sadness. No heroism, just human tragedy. Speaker-off use of silence, a powerful tool. Blade 2 does not shy away from muted sequences. Del Toro and Beltrami often cut the music entirely to increase suspense, e.g., Reaper stalking in tunnels. Emphasize emotional vulnerability, e.g., Blade and Nyssa's last moments. Let diegetic sound, footsteps, breathing, blood drops, take over, making the environment feel immersive and threatening. This choice gives the audience room to absorb tension and emotion without being manipulated by constant background score. Musical score balance between soundtrack and score. What sets Blade 2 apart from typical action films is how seamlessly the original score and the licensed tracks work together. The soundtrack fuels Blade's identity, cool, lethal, urban. The score fuels the narrative's heart and horror, tragic, dangerous, epic. The transitions between the two are smooth. A club scene track may fade into Beltrami's brooding themes, reflecting a shift from spectacle to substance. Speech balloon final thoughts. Music as identity and atmosphere. The music of Blade 2 is not an accessory, it is a storytelling engine. Through stylized beats, emotional themes, and haunting silence, the soundtrack and score work in tandem to elevate action to art, deepen emotional beats, build a sonic world that's as sharp and memorable as Blade's sword. Whether it's a pulse of a nightclub or the sorrow of a final farewell, the music ensures that Blade 2 isn't just seen, it's felt. Blade 2, 2002, themes and messages explained. Blade 2, directed by Guillermo del Toro, is more than just a stylish vampire action film. Beneath its high-octane violence and gothic visuals lies a narrative rich in themes of identity, betrayal, moral duality, genetic manipulation, and the nature of monstrosity. The film digs deeper into the existential conflict of its characters and the moral ambiguity that defines its world. #1. Identity and duality. At its core, Blade 2 is a story about being caught between two worlds, human and vampire, and trying to reconcile both. Blade, the titular Daywalker, is the embodiment of duality. He possesses the strengths of vampires, but retains the conscience and empathy of a human. Throughout the film, Blade's identity is tested, particularly in his uneasy alliance with the Bloodpack, a group of vampires who once trained to kill him. His conflicted relationship with Nyssa adds emotional weight to his internal struggle. Her nobility challenges his rigid view of vampires as pure evil. Right-pointing magnifying glass of theme suggests that identity is not always defined by origin or nature, but by choice and values. Scales #2. Morality in shades of gray. One of the strongest themes in Blade 2 is the absence of clear moral binaries. Blade must choose between working with former enemies, vampires, or allowing the greater threat, the Reapers, to decimate both species. Characters like Nyssa and Nomak complicate the audience's understanding of right and wrong. Nyssa, though a vampire, is honorable and compassionate. Nomak, though monstrous, is a victim of biological manipulation and betrayal by his own father. The vampires, usually villains in the franchise, are depicted here as just as vulnerable to extinction, turning the enemy into an ally. Right-pointing magnifying glass, this theme critiques the simplicity of good versus evil and encourages a deeper exploration of motive, survival, and consequence. 3. Genetic engineering and playing God. The creation of the Reapers introduces a theme rooted in science fiction and bioethics, the dangers of genetic manipulation. Damaskinos, the vampire overlord, seeks to create a superior vampire species through experimentation, without considering the ethical ramifications. The result is Nomak, a powerful but unstable hybrid that turns on its creators, symbolizing the consequences of hubris. This theme resonates with real-world anxieties around biotechnology, cloning, and unchecked scientific ambition. Right-pointing magnifying glass del Toro uses the Reaper threat as a metaphor for what happens when creators lose control over their own creations. Repeat button 4. Betrayal and trust. The film consistently explores broken alliances and betrayal. The Bloodpack initially pretend to ally with Blade, but their loyalty is questionable, especially Reinhardt's ongoing antagonism. Scud, Blade's trusted technician, is revealed to be a traitor working for Damaskinos. Even within the vampire hierarchy, Damaskinos betrays both his children, Nyssa and Nomak, for the sake of his selfish agenda. Right-pointing magnifying glass, this recurring theme reveals the fragile nature of trust in a world built on fear, survival, and power struggles. Broken Heart 5. Love, Tragedy, and Loss. Unlike the first Blade film, Blade 2 contains strong emotional undercurrents, particularly in Blade's relationship with Nyssa. Nyssa challenges Blade's belief that all vampires are inherently evil. Her ultimate decision to die in the sun after losing everything humanizes her and deepens Blade's own sense of isolation. Blade's silent grief shows a rare moment of vulnerability, reminding viewers that beneath the armor, he is still human. Right-pointing magnifying glass, the film uses their connection to explore themes of compassion, loneliness, and the cost of war on the soul. 6. Evolution versus extinction. The Reapers represent a new breed, more advanced and deadlier than traditional vampires. Their existence sparks a theme of evolutionary survival, forcing vampires and humans to team up against a shared extinction-level threat. The Reapers are not just monsters. They are the natural consequence of the vampire elite attempting to manipulate their gene pool. Blade, who himself is a hybrid, sees a terrifying mirror of what he could have become without a moral compass. Right-pointing magnifying glass, this theme explores how every species, natural or supernatural, must adapt or face extinction, but that evolution without ethics leads to destruction. 7. The nature of monstrosity. Del Toro's direction places a strong emphasis on the question, what makes someone a monster? Is it biology? Blade is part vampire, yet he fights for humans. Is it appearance? Nomak is grotesque but evokes sympathy. Is it action? Damaskinos, though well-dressed and composed, commits atrocities in secret labs. Right-pointing magnifying glass, the film challenges viewers to question appearances and recognize that true monstrosity often lies in choices, not genetics. Speech Balloon Final Thought, a thoughtful genre piece. While Blade 2 functions effectively as a visually gripping, action-driven vampire saga, it also presents a layered and thoughtful narrative that delves into ethics, emotion, and existentialism. The film never preaches, but its complex characters and moral ambiguity invite the audience to think about issues of trust, identity, science, and power. In true Guillermo del Toro fashion, the monsters are not just enemies to kill. They are mirrors reflecting the darker sides of humanity. Blade 2, 2002, visual effects and CGI, a detailed exploration. Directed by Guillermo del Toro, Blade 2 was a visual effects milestone for its time, fusing practical effects, creature makeup, and CGI to build a gritty, nightmarish world. While some digital effects may feel dated by modern standards, the film's commitment to practical artistry and inventive visual storytelling still makes it a standout entry in the genre. Electric light bulb, a seamless blend of practical and digital. One of the most striking aspects of Blade 2's effects is its hybrid approach. Del Toro, known for his love of practical creature design and horror aesthetics, used physical prosthetics and animatronics in tandem with early 2000s digital technology to craft the terrifying look of the Reapers and the film's heightened combat sequences. The Reapers, in particular, are a showcase of this blend. Their split-jaw anatomy was created using a combination of practical head puppets and CGI enhancements. In close-up scenes, especially in the underground sewer hive, practical makeup and animatronics dominate, lending a tactile realism to the monsters. In fast-paced action or wide shots, CGI takes over, animating the Reaper's jaw flays and their erratic, spider-like movements. Right-pointing magnifying glass, a film smartly switches between digital and practical techniques based on distance and focus, enhancing immersion rather than distracting from it. Creature design, a Guillermo del Toro signature. The visual effects team, under Del Toro's guidance, leaned heavily into grotesque body horror, a key part of the film's atmosphere. The Reaper's anatomy, pale, veiny skin, bloated musculature, and a horrifying, dislocating jaw, was designed to visually differentiate them from both humans and traditional vampires. This transformation required extensive prosthetic application, silicone skin overlays, and animatronic features for realism. When combined with CG jaw movements and blood effects, the result was a visceral visual language for this new vampire species. Right-pointing magnifying glass, this fusion helped the Reapers feel like a genuine biological evolution, rather than CGI creatures pasted into the world. Cross-sword hash-action sequences, digital enhancements in a physical world. Blade 2 features numerous hand-to-hand combat scenes, many of which are choreographed with martial art precision and executed with wire work and stunt performances. Certain scenes, like Blade's duel with Reinhard, are grounded in physical stunts and shot with kinetic, fluid camera work. However, during scenes involving superhuman feats, leaps, flips, or speed, CGI doubles were used. These moments include Blade spinning through the air or Reapers moving at unnatural speed. While impressive for the time, some of these digital stand-ins now appear slightly rubbery or artificial, especially in slowed-down frames or repeated viewing. Right-pointing magnifying glass, nevertheless. They serve their purpose in amplifying the superhero vampire mythos and still contribute to the stylized comic book tone. Cityscape Weird stars world building with effects, set extensions, and lighting integration. Blade 2 uses visual effects to expand the scope of its vampire world. The Soleil, the Vampire High Council's futuristic chambers, and the surgical laboratories were augmented with digital set extensions. These effects, paired with Del Toro's signature lighting techniques, rich shadows, sickly greens, and reds, ensure the CG never feels out of place. The color grading and practical lighting are carefully coordinated with CGI, preventing visual dissonance between real and artificial elements. Right-pointing magnifying glass, this integration is critical in maintaining the gritty realism of the film's environments. Blood effects and gore, digital meets practical. Blood plays a major visual role in Blade 2, often used for shock, symbolism, and style. Digital blood splatters were employed for action scenes to maintain continuity and reduce cleanup, but they are sometimes noticeable due to their glossy or overly fluid appearance. In contrast, practical gore effects, exploding bodies, torn limbs, or decaying reapers are handled with traditional makeup effects, giving these moments a more convincing, grotesque texture. Right-pointing magnifying glass of visual contrast between digital and practical blood may date the film slightly, but it doesn't significantly undermine emotion. Challenges and innovations of early 2000 CGI. When viewed through a 2002 lens, Blade 2 was visually ambitious and technologically advanced. The CGI-enhanced fight scenes, such as blade spinning dropkick and acrobatics, were part of a trend popularized by The Matrix 1999. While some of these visuals now appear artificial or overly fluid, they were cutting edge at the time and inspired future comic book adaptations. The biggest triumph lies not in photorealism but in how seamlessly the effects support the tone, comic book violence, gothic horror, and mythic spectacle. End with left arrow above final verdict. Stylish, gritty, and purposeful. From a third-person perspective, the visual effects and CGI in Blade 2 serve more than just spectacle. They are integral to its world-building, horror elements, and action design. While some digital moments now feel dated, the overall execution remains stylistically consistent and atmospherically rich. The careful interplay between practical effects and CGI, especially in creature design and lighting, ensures that Blade 2 still resonates visually. It reflects Guillermo del Toro's understanding of monsters, not as distractions, but as living metaphors wrapped in visual artistry. Blade 2, 2002, set design and locations, a deep dive. In Blade 2, director Guillermo del Toro masterfully transforms the urban landscape into a gritty, gothic underworld that mirrors the conflict between light and darkness, human and vampire, tradition and mutation. The film's set design and locations are not just backdrops. They are characters in their own right, drenched in atmosphere and thematic symbolism. Milky Way, a gritty and immersive vampire underworld. Set primarily in Prague, the film uses the city's old-world charm and shadowy architecture to craft a vampire-infested dystopia that feels both ancient and futuristic. The choice of Prague is a deliberate one. Its cobblestone alleys, baroque facades, and underground catacombs lend a timeless quality that enhances the mythic tone of the story. The Vampire Council's headquarters, for example, is built with stark, metallic interiors, cold lighting, and industrial-scale design, signaling a cold, authoritarian regime that contrasts with the more tribal, organic feel of the Reaper's lair. These grand and often minimalist vampire sets, with their clean symmetry and harsh lighting, reflect a species obsessed with order, power, and longevity. Right-pointing magnifying glass, this cold aesthetic is intentionally inhuman, aligning the vampires more with predators and with misunderstood beings. #the Reaper Nest, claustrophobia and chaos. In stark contrast, the Reaper Hive, hidden in the underground sewers, is grimy, organic, and deliberately claustrophobic. The walls seem to sweat, the air feels thick, and the tight tunnels restrict movement, perfectly enhancing the horror tone. The set is layered with pipes, grates, rust, slime, and dripping water, creating a space that feels alive, diseased, and decaying. Every detail, the narrow corridors, flickering lights, and echoing drips, contributes to a visceral atmosphere that elevates the Reapers as primal, animalistic threats. Right-pointing magnifying glass is a visual representation of the new breed of vampires as parasitic and invasive, living beneath the structured world of both humans and traditional vampires. Laboratories and weaponry workshops, functional futurism. Blade's world straddles a line between the supernatural and the technological. This duality is captured in the laboratory sets, where the Daywalker and his allies experiment with tools to fight evolving threats. Blade's hideout includes custom weaponry stations, blood storage fridges, surgical tables, and armory walls, all rendered with functional realism. The props, such as UV grenades, serum injectors, and silver nitrate bombs, are designed with a gritty, militaristic aesthetic that feels grounded in the real world despite their fantastical purposes. Right-pointing magnifying glass, these sets reflect Blade's own hybrid nature, part human, part vampire, and driven by science and survival, not mythology. Office building, urban locations, and rooftops, heightening the comic book feel. The action frequently spills into urban exteriors, abandoned buildings, alleyways, and rooftops, shot with high-contrast lighting and stylized camera angles that give the film a neo-noir and comic book flair. One memorable location is the Club of Bloodpack Flair, which recalls the iconic nightclub from the first Blade film. It's a place of hedonism and horror, bathed in red lighting, smoke, and pulsing music, visually symbolizing the excess and decadence of vampire society. The use of rooftops and city skylines during action sequences adds verticality and momentum, emphasizing Blade's mobility and tactical prowess. Right-pointing magnifying glass, these set pieces provide a dynamic visual rhythm to the narrative, breaking up the more confined interiors and grounding the fantasy in a lived-in urban space. Costumes and props as extensions of set design. Though technically part of costume design, Blade's iconic black leather trench coat, silver weaponry, and sunglasses complement the sets around him. He doesn't just move through these locations, he visually contrasts them. In sterile vampire chambers, Blade's utilitarian gear looks out of place, marking him as an outsider. In the grungy souls, he blends in more, reflecting his role as a creature of both worlds. Right-pointing magnifying glass, his very presence in each location reinforces themes of identity, conflict, and alienation. Artist palette, color palette, and environmental storytelling. The film's production design leans heavily on monochromatic and dual-tone palettes, often using greens, grays, and blues in vampire scenes and reds and yellows in action or Reaper-heavy sequences. This color-coded design is not just aesthetic. It mirrors the emotional tone and narrative shifts in the film. The use of decay, industrial rust, and broken infrastructure in many sets also reinforces a theme of collapse, both in vampire society and the boundaries between species. Right-pointing magnifying glass, Del Toro's attention to visual storytelling through set design gives Blade a layered, textured world that rewards repeat viewings. Final verdict: visually cohesive, thematically rich. From a third-person perspective, the set design and locations in Blade 2 are a triumph of atmospheric world-building. They serve more than just visual interest. They are woven into the film's mythology, themes, and emotional beats. The blend of industrial modernism, gothic horror, urban decay, and high-tech realism craft a believable world that enhances the stakes and elevates the story. Whether the gutted subway tunnel crawling with reapers, a steel-plated vampire throne room, or a grimy back-alley confrontation, each set serves to root the fantastical in a tangible, emotionally resonant space. Blade 2, 2002, Dialogue and Script, In-Depth Analysis. In Blade 2, screenwriter David S. Goyer crafts a script that strikes a delicate balance between hard-edged action, gothic horror, and character-driven moments of tension and vulnerability. The film's dialogue is tailored to fit its comic book roots while still rooting itself in a gritty, realistic world of blood-soaked morality, betrayal, and uneasy alliances. Tone: sharp, minimalist, and stylishly cool. The dialogue in Blade 2 reflects the personalities of its key players, especially Blade himself. Much of the writing is concise, efficient, and stylized, often leaning into cool-headed bravado and understated intensity rather than long-winded exposition. Blade's lines are typically short, direct, and laced with menace. His words cut like his weapons, economical but devastating. The film avoids over-explaining lore through dialogue, instead trusting the audience to absorb the world visually and contextually. Right-pointing magnifying glass's minimalist approach adds to the film's cool aesthetic and keeps the pacing tight without bogging down the script with excessive exposition. Performing arts character voice, unique and consistent. Each character's dialogue reflects their distinct personality and function within the story. Blade, Wesley Snipes' speech is clipped, deliberate, and full of restrained aggression. He speaks like a warrior, rarely wasting words, often punctuating his lines with silence or glare. His one-liners, "You obviously do not know who you are if ***** and with ****, are delivered with lethal charisma. Whistler, Kris Kristofferson, sarcastic, grizzled, and world-weary. His dialogue is peppered with dry humor and wisdom, serving as a counterweight to Blade's stoicism. His verbal jabs often highlight his affection for Blade beneath the tough exterior. Scud, Norman Reedus talks like a brash, modern-day techie, irreverent, jokey, and constantly challenging authority. His dialogue provides comic relief and often flirts with arrogance, which cleverly sets up the narrative twist regarding his true loyalties. Nyssa, Leonor Varela, speaks with a sense of nobility, restraint, and inner conflict. Her lines often hint at a discomfort with vampire traditions and her fascination with Blade. Her dialogue adds emotional depth and elevates themes of identity and betrayal. Nomak, Luke Goss, is a tragic villain. His dialogue is sparse but philosophical. When he speaks, his words are heavy with existential pain and anger. He is not just a monster, but a cursed soul with a reason to hate both humans and vampires. Right-pointing magnifying glass's clear differentiation in dialogue styles enriches character dynamics and helps the audience quickly understand motivations without forced exposition. Explosion symbol memorable lines and quotable moments. Though Blade 2 isn't a dialogue-heavy film, it contains several iconic and memorable lines that stick with the viewer. Blade, keep your friends close. Keep your enemies closer. A classic line made personal and threatening when delivered in Blade's intense tone. Whistler, to Blade, they're gonna burn you at the stake, but you'll still be standing there smirking. Reflects Blade's invincibility and Whistler's dry admiration. Nomak, we are the future. A chilling declaration of the Reaper's evolutionary threat, delivered with conviction and sadness. Scud, you mean to tell me that a bloodthirsty vampire death squad is our only hope? A sarcastic yet perfectly timed line that captures the absurdity of Blade's alliance with the Bloodpack. Right-pointing magnifying glass, these lines encapsulate the film's themes: trust, transformation, and survival in a world with no moral absolutes. Clapperboard balancing exposition and action. One of the script's strengths is that it avoids heavy-handed exposition. Instead of long lore dumps, the story unfolds through visual storytelling and character interaction, with dialogue used to reinforce the stakes and deepen the tension between allies and enemies. For example, the alliance between Blade and the Bloodpack is explored not through verbose discussions but through terse exchanges, subtle glances, and frequent betrayals. Conversations between Blade and Nyssa explore more philosophical questions, what it means to be human, the curse of vampirism, without derailing the film's momentum. Right-pointing magnifying glass, this approach keeps the story dynamic, maintaining suspense and emotional resonance while letting action take center stage. Performing arts themes reflected in dialogue. Many of the film's core themes, identity, duality, betrayal, evolution, are echoed in the dialogue. Whether it's Nomak speaking about being cast out by his own kind or Blade warning Nyssa about the cost of trust, the script underscores its larger ideas without sacrificing character realism. Dialogue doesn't merely serve the plot. It builds the world and its moral complexity. Subtext is crucial. Many characters say less than they mean, especially Blade and Nomak, allowing the audience to interpret the deeper emotional layers. White heavy checkmark final verdict. Style with substance. From a third-person perspective, the dialogue and script of Blade 2 are a solid blend of comic book flair and mature thematic nuance. The film's writing is lean but laid, favoring sharp wit and stylized brevity over melodrama or unnecessary exposition. While not overly verbose, the script effectively uses silence, subtext, and tone to communicate inner conflict and world-building. The memorable one-liners, distinct character voices, and philosophical undertones give the film a deeper emotional resonance, even within its action-heavy structure. In short, the dialogue is as blade-sharp as a protagonist, precise, deadly, and undeniably cool. Would you like this breakdown rewritten for a YouTube video narration or turned into an SEO-optimized blog post for your channel facts and review? Blade 2, 2002, Genre Execution, a bold expansion of vampire action horror. Blade 2, directed by Guillermo del Toro, is a genre film that doesn't just adhere to the expectations of vampire horror or superhero action, it elevates and reinvents them. With its hybrid identity, part comic book film, part martial arts spectacle, part horror thriller, it succeeds in delivering a richly layered experience that stands out within its genre. #rooted in vampire lore, reinvented with sci-fi horror. At its core, Blade 2 is a vampire movie, but it doesn't rely solely on traditional gothic horror. Instead, it pushes the boundaries of the subgenre by introducing the Reapers, a mutated breed of vampire that feeds on other vampires. These creatures, with their dislocating jaws and parasitic biology, introduce a body horror element inspired by classic sci-fi, like Alien, giving the film a fresh twist on vampire mythology. The Reaper's design and behavior mark a significant departure from standard genre tropes, blending elements of biological terror and evolutionary dread, enhancing both suspense and grotesque fascination. Right-pointing magnifying glass, this infusion of science fiction horror into the vampire genre marks one of the most inventive genre executions of the early 2000s. #superhero action that embraces martial arts cinema. While Blade is based on a Marvel comic, it doesn't follow the clean, quippy, brightly lit style of traditional superhero movies. Blade 2 leans into a darker, grittier aesthetic, drawing heavy inspiration from Hong Kong action cinema and martial arts choreography. The fight scenes are fast-paced, fluid, and shot with clarity and kinetic energy. Blade is portrayed as a mythic anti-hero, stoic, unstoppable, and deeply flawed, closer to a Ronin than a Caped Crusader. The film's tone is grimy and brutal, reflecting its horror roots rather than comic book lightheartedness. Right-pointing magnifying glass rather than following conventional superhero origin journey formula, the film operates more like a war movie mixed with samurai ethics and apocalyptic stakes. Performing arts balancing genre elements, action, horror, suspense, and drama. Blade 2 successfully juggles multiple genre elements, a feat few genre films manage without feeling bloated or inconsistent. Ray gun action. The film features extended combat scenes, gunplay, sword fights, and explosive stunts. The choreography is fluid and visceral, with a mix of wire work and hand-to-hand combat. Key action set pieces are not only exciting but also emotionally loaded, often tied to betrayal or life-or-death moral dilemmas. Ghost horror. The Reapers create genuine fear. Their parasitic nature, grotesque physiology, and relentless hunger inject a real sense of danger and claustrophobia. The tone is relentlessly bleak, with dark corridors, urban decay, and body horror elements, creating an atmosphere